So Hearthstone's next standard format rotation is just around the corner. We're losing 3 expansions out of standard format: Forged in the Barrens, United in Stormwind, and Fractured in Alterac Valley. And with them, of course, we're losing some legendary cards. And particularly in this video, I wanted to talk about the legendary cards we're losing that never really got there. The cards that never actually saw play, found a home, found a deck, or found any relevance. Because it's fun to see rotations happen, right? But it's also kind of sad to know that some cool designs and some lovable cards in other ways never made any sense. And it felt like, you know, if you opened, for instance, Niru Fireblade in a pack in Hearthstone, that was just a wasted card for 2 years. His entire standard format lifespan, he never quite got there. So I wanted to talk about the 10 failed legendaries from the year of the Griffin that, with a couple weeks left probably in their lifespan, never actually saw play. But real quick before we do, let's talk about our sponsor for this video. So what's your dream job? I think mine is piloting giant mechs, and that's exactly what you get to do in Mech Arena. If you haven't checked this game out yet, it's actually really fun. You assemble a roster of mechs and then you take one into battle, and it's PvP multiplayer, so you are playing against real people and trying to either blow them up with some rockets or machine guns or a bunch of other really fun weapons, and different mechs have different special abilities, and it all looks great while you're doing it as well. This is not some super simple mobile game. Some great 3D graphics in this one. And it's always a good time to start Mech Arena because there's all kinds of events. First up this March is the Holly event, which gives players the chance to earn some new mech skins and the ultra powerful Missile Rack 16. Then it's time for the Shamrock Slam, bringing the Sentinel mech, whose tall shield ability makes it a Javelin fan's worst nightmare. The event also introduces the Helix Rack homing missile launcher, new implants, and 2 deep green mech skins. It's completely free to play on Android, iOS, and PC right now, and you can use my personal link or scan my QR code to get bonuses worth $30. We're talking about 1 Rocket Mortar 6, 1 amateur crate, and 1 skin to help you kickstart your game. Oh, and hey, be sure to add me to your friends list as well. My ID's up here right above my head. So don't wait around. Check out those links in the description and play Mech Arena now. So let's get back into the list here with Niru Fireblade, since I teed him up and teased him. And this guy came out with Forged in the Barrens for Warlock, of course, and I was so excited when this card landed. I thought, man, this looks like so much fun. You know, drive yourself to fatigue as quickly as you can, and then you try to win by just swarming the board with these 3/2 imps. It reminded me a little bit of the portal from Journey to Unguro for the discard quest, and I always really like trying to make that work. So I thought, man, Niru Fireblade sounds so fun, kind of racing against yourself and your deck running out of time. The reality, of course, that just did not work in the modern era of Hearthstone. This board of repeating 3/2s just wasn't really a win condition, right? It didn't give you enough advantage, and the fatigue downside obviously was rather enormous, taking this increasing damage. Now, beyond that, what happened with Niru Fireblade is the very next expansion, literally in United Stormwind, Warlock got the quest line, the Demon Seed, and that gave you a fatigue win condition that was legit and really good. And in fact, that card's gotten nerfed a bunch because it turned your fatigue damage into, you know, lethality instead of just a board of kind of helpless and hapless 3/2 imps. So it's like they printed this really cool card in Niru Fireblade, this really fun way to try to win a game, you know, this fun reward for fatigue, and then immediately erased it. It was just gone and useless because in the same standard formatation, you gave yourself a way better way to utilize fatigue. So even if you could get a fatigue warlock to work, there was no reason ever to run Niru Fireblade, because this better fatigue reward existed right alongside him. So it always felt really strange to me to print this card and then just make him useless right away in the very next set. And as a result of that, of course, Niru Fireblades never made sense and never gotten there. And I feel like definitely one of the biggest lost opportunity cards in all of Hearthstone's history. So next up, I wanted to talk about Rise to the Occasion. This is the Paladin quest line from United in Stormwind. And there has been some tinkering with this card. I'm not going to say it never, ever saw any degree of play. It's certainly a little better than Niru Fireblade, for instance. But it has always been very fringe at best in standard format. And namely, I think the more important conversation is this is the only quest line that never really saw a lot of play. If you look through all of the other quest lines and United and Stormwind, they all saw some play. Even Rogue, which is the one that's probably seen the least play lately, was a deck that worked. SI7 Rogue was pretty good there for a little while, whereas Rise of the Occasion never quite rose to the occasion, if you will, and that is despite multiple extra levels of support for Silverhand cards. Over the last few years, we've gotten a handful of different Silverhand synergy cards, and some of those have gotten played a little more even than Rise of the Occasion. It feels like the payoff for this one of buffing your Silverhand recruits +2/+2, that just doesn't hit fast enough or meaningful enough to require all of this extra commitment. That's less of a defined win condition than many of the other quest lines that are doing crazy spell damage, this extra lethality, quest hunters giving you this just obscene results, and some 2/2 buffs just don't really keep pace with the likes of the rest of the quest line rewards. So Rise of the Occasion, not an absolute disaster of a card, I don't think, but probably the biggest disappointment from all the quest lines, and a card that never really feels like it got there for the Silverhand recruits. They were never quite that good, which I always really wanted to make this one work, and I'm sad it didn't. Oh, I bet some people are going to talk about Quest Druid, by the way. I should add an acknowledgement here. Quest Druid probably could have been on this list, the Lost in the Park quest for Druid, but it actually started getting played like this week. Quest Druid is now, right now, as this video comes out, a tier 2 deck. So Quest Druid very much made it just under the wire for playability, but I think actually has gotten played more in the last week than Rise of the Occasion has ever peaked in regards to its percentage of the meta. So that one barely made it in by the deadline. Rise of the Occasion did not. So this next one's Auctioneer Jackson, and yeah, this card's really, really bad. I don't know if I've ever actually seen this in a standard format game. I think it's popped up in some duels buckets here and there. But despite tradable, I think, being an incredibly successful keyword, I think a lot of people love tradable. It enabled a bunch of cards to get played that perhaps otherwise wouldn't. It's made text cards feel really relevant. Tradable is an absolute home run of a keyword, one of the best I think we've ever had, but Auctioneer Jackson just didn't really reward that or support it enough. Trading does cost mana. The Auctioneer Jackson has this mana overhead as well of 2, so getting to pick your cards at such a high tax, at such a high price from a mana standpoint, just doesn't really fit Hearthstone these days. You never need to find anything so specifically that you're willing to give up so much tempo or so much efficiency in the process, or there are probably just better ways to do that, and sometimes just drawing a bunch of cards really efficiently is another good way to find the things you're looking for without having to rely on this kind of discover upside. So in many ways a card that's representative of tradable or supposed to be some tradable synergy, but it didn't work. That said, that's no slight against the keyword. I think tradable is great, and actually a keyword I hope pops into the core set. There's been a lot of discussion about that. I don't know if it will. We haven't seen too many cards like that make it into the core set, or keywords like this become the new permanent sort of keywords, but if tradable did, I think I'd be rather happy about that. So next up here for Warrior, we have Lothar. I haven't even really thought about this card in a while, which is a shame. Lothar is a really iconic character, super important to Warcraft history. This card has not been super important or relevant to Hearthstone history, unfortunately. Is 7 mana 7/7 here that, in theory, there's some stuff about this that looks okay. It clears a minion, it scales up a little bit. The reality, of course, is the random targeting here is a little iffy, and often not even really against the shape of boards you want. If your opponent has 3 3/3s, you're not usually very excited to just kill 1 3/3 and leave 2 of them behind. So the slightly wider, smaller boards that Hearthstone often tends to encourage really don't play very well with Lothar. And although this kind of technically sort of fits in some big warrior packages as well, that's something that never really quite sang with cards like Lothar driving it as much as past cards like Rattlegore, for instance, that felt like a much bigger, more significant sort of reward. So even when you were doing those sorts of things, Lothar usually wasn't the best case scenario or the important card in those packages. So all in all, synonymous with the success of Warrior lately, but it kind of makes sense that Warrior hasn't been working super well when you look back through a lot of its old legendaries. There's Lothars. They don't have as many powerful, interesting cards to choose from. So yeah, sadly for such an iconic character, this has certainly not been an iconic Hearthstone existence. So speaking of Stormwind legendaries that didn't quite get there, this is Grand Magus Antonidas. And listen to this. I gave this card 5 stars in the card review. I thought, man, look 3 fireballs that can go face. You get an empty board. This thing's 18 damage. That's insane. You know, like, oh, they're putting so many fire spells. That's not going to be a hard condition to meet at all. And then you're just going to blow people up with this one. Of course, you know, the reality is getting an empty board to plop an Antonidas sounds a little bit tougher than you might expect. Getting these fireballs each turn in a row, not necessarily super hard to do. I don't think that was the reason for this card's failure, but that combination of demand and reward didn't really line up for Antonidas. But I think more importantly, the Mage quest line was just so crazy busted good when it first came out with United and Stormwind. Who needs a card like Antonidas? I'm playing for all 3 spell types here for spell schools to reward the quest line instead, because that payoff was just so much more significant. Ignite and quest line stuff could just blow people up way more reliably and flexibly than committing into this Antonidas game plan. So I definitely was a little too hopeful for Antonidas. He did not live up to that 5-star status, and in reality has looked a little bit more like a 1-star legendary, making this perhaps one of my most significant card review misses of all time. Which is funny, because this might be the worst card of all time. Not quite, but Sheldris Moontree here. I've never seen this get played at all. I have to remind myself what he does. The next 3 spells you draw are cast when drawn. Yeah, of course. So I think in theory this is supposed to be a big payoff for big spells. You know, oh, I'm going to play Sheldris and then just draw all these big spells, and I'm going to have this just awesome mana cheat. You know, 3 10 mana spells. I spent 8 to get 30 mana worth of stuff. Of course, committing 8 mana though up front to do that is a little tough, even in combination with all the mana cheat available to Druid. Why spend 8 to set up all these other mana cheat plays when you can just cheat the mana directly or just play the spells directly? And of course, you limit yourself with this card, because if you draw cheap spells next, then you're really sad, because Sheldris kind of got wasted and you spent 8 mana to get a 2 mana spell played for free, and maybe it's not even targeted correctly. Maybe it's coming at a bad time. So, you know, you sacrifice tempo, you sacrifice a lot of control, you sacrifice deck building flexibility, and those are all enormous costs for a payoff here that's not even really that important to a class like Druid. They have so many other ways to get tons of mana cheat and play giant big things. So why ever rely on Sheldris? He's just going to make you more inconsistent. And I think Druid identified that really quickly and never looked at this card again. They gave it 1 glance when it came out and never thought about it twice, and probably didn't even really think about it once. I don't remember this one being particularly highly thought of during review season either. So yeah, this card's just been an absolute complete miss for Druid, a really terrible fit for the class, really, and a card I don't think ever actually seen in standard format, other than me trying to make it work probably. So this next one makes me a little bit sad. I feel like this card, more than perhaps any other in the video, felt like it almost could have gotten there. It feels like it has potential both from a fit standpoint, because we've had Thief Rogue stuff that succeeded, but also, you know, I think the power level on this one feels a little higher than the rest, but somehow it just didn't quite line up. Seraphine, if you'll remember, would replace your minions in hand and deck with ones from other classes. Those cost 2 less. So when things worked out well, this could be a lot of mana cheat. You know, you get 5 or 6 cards in hand discounted, and if they're big relevant things, you're talking about maybe like a 10 mana discount on your hand. And we've actually used this to success in things like duels. That can feel really good. I think in standard format, though, you know, your minions are good. You're running minions you like in Rogue. They're doing these really specific things, and trading those in for random things is risky because those may not have beneficial effects. Those are inconsistent. And Rogue has been able to win consistently by playing for those pre-built game plans and playing towards win conditions. And a lot of the other Thief cards could just cheat as effectively, you know, jackpot into some big spells and then use the Naga to cheat out your big spells. That's a more reliable game plan probably than Seraphine, which is running a lot of risk by sacrificing your own resources, whereas with jackpot, you're kind of making extra resources and playing off of those. Plus, you know, you don't want to transform your Knolls into non-Knolls. Hopefully you're playing the Knolls pre-turn 5, but you get the idea, right? There are some risks here inherent to Seraphine. So, you know, I don't think that was necessarily a design fail on this card. Again, I think there is some latent power there. They gave it enough mana cheat that it should have almost felt relevant. It just never quite fit. The puzzle pieces didn't line up for Seraphine, which I still had a lot of fun with this card. So this one doesn't feel like as much of a lost opportunity as others. It's still enjoyable, even if it's not ever something that was super powerful. And that's okay for legendaries to exist in that space. So, you know, failed from a competitive gameplay standpoint, but definitely not failed from a fun or interest level standpoint. So maybe in some ways not the best fit for this video, but I was kind of thinking a competitive standpoint first and foremost. So next up, we've got Goliath Sneed's Masterpiece. And man, I'm realizing just how many Stormwind legendaries are on this video. There's a lot. I mean, I know there's only 3 expansions featured here, but it feels like Stormwind's definitely overrepresentative. Somebody do the count. I'm curious. But Sneed's Masterpiece here, of course, this just kind of felt like a throwaway card when it got revealed. You know, it's a mini set card. A lot of the times the legendary designs in the mini set are a little bit less complex or interesting. They kind of feel like extra designs, or some of them just feel tacked on. Obviously, there's some good ones too. You know, clearly I'm not saying all mini set legendaries are bad, but it's like feast or famine, right? There's some really good ones and then some just clunkers. And Goliath Sneed's Masterpiece fits in that bracket. This is the kind of card, you know, it's great in Arena, of course. It's relevant in certain game modes and sorts of things, but in a standard format world, this card's just kind of a board maintenance piece. It doesn't really make sense. These decks don't need these sorts of things. They've got game plans, they've got synergies, they've got packages they're trying to play towards, and Goliath, it just rarely ever fits into those sorts of worlds. So happy when you randomly discover this guy sometimes and he gives you a great answer on board, but as for actually running him in decks, nobody needed to do that, really. I think we all sort of expected that when this got revealed. I don't think Blizzard was surprised by that fact either. Just feels a little bit like filler, but as a result, of course, never really gets played. And then my final legendary for the video here is Hala, the Matron Protectorate. This one, man, this got a lot of ire when it got revealed because we were all like, "Hey, wait a minute, what's the deal with this? Why is it a Flame Waker, but it's 8 mana?" Like, this doesn't really line up, right? Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to spend so much mana on a Hala Matron Protectorate? And I think there was some list that kind of teased with this one a little bit, and people were like, maybe, but never really got over the hump as far as I can recall, at least. So I think Hala very quickly lived up to the expectations of failure, I guess I would say. Because again, it feels inefficient. It feels like the payoff here for an 8 mana card is so incredibly low. I always thought this card looked a little goofy too, like the design on the dragon, I don't know, looks kind of short and stumpy or something. Looks more like a tiny lizard than a big old dragon in some ways. So yeah, Hala, I mean, listen, you know, it's fine. When you randomly discovered this off of your 10 mana spell, sometimes you'd be really happy. When you got this off of the Countess and it was 0 mana in Paladin, that could be really insane. Like, there's some cool moments with Hala. It's one of those fun cards to exist when it's in the pool. It's nice, but as far as, again, making the cut in a deck list, this definitely felt a little bit like a mini set filler legendary that nobody really needed and as such never really saw play. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this video. I am curious which other legendaries you feel like never really lived up to expectations or hit the mark before they're rotating. We're gonna have some more fun core set discussion videos in the near future as well, so stay tuned for all of those. But yeah, Niru Fireblade, still sad about this one. I really wanted this card to work forever, and it was just such an insult to see him replaced by the quest line right away. So Niru, we'll miss you, buddy. Maybe I'll take you out in Wild and try to do something cool with you there, but I bet you're even worse in Wild format. So Anyway, share your thoughts on these cards. Look forward to hearing your take on these. I'm sure some of you are going to argue these got played. Feel free to do that. I'm not sure I'll buy it. I'm going to need some data or some convincing. But for me, at least, these were the 10 legendaries that I felt like failed me or failed to live up to the expectations I had for them in one way or another. So feel free to share your own takes, your own thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. Check out that sponsor down there in the description and Pin's comment. But thanks again. And until next time, game on.